Ah, the beautiful No Quan Desert, a very sunny place full of vibrant life, also including, but not limited to, horrific death. The desert is absolutely littered with sun-bleached bones and rotten corpses. But more importantly, it is also home to the S&R Rifle Company, the largest independent defense company / war merchant on the entire planet. What's that? What planet, you ask? Why, of course, the planet of Degum. One that has been ravaged by a multi-decade war between two governing powers known as the RimWorld Marshal Service and the United Rebel Forces, as well as many more smaller and somewhat neutral factions. The two main factions have been at war until recently, that is. They actually just signed a peace treaty, which is a little bit of a problem for us as warlords because that means we now need to find new clientele, especially since our weapon lockers are completely filled to the brim with bow and arrows, firearms, knives, swords, blunt weaponry, anything you could think of really. Luckily though, we do still have our great big mercenary Holland mule, known as the one and only Shinichi's Pride. As you may notice, there are some little animations coming off of it, and I have a feeling that has something to do with this save being from the previous version of RimWorld and all of the mods that I have installed. So just be fair warned that if you are trying to play along and use all these mods, it might not work at all. Anywho though, I decided that a good research project for us might be enlisted uniforms, which will actually allow us to create a smorgasbord of different types of uniforms. Because even when factions are no longer at war, they still have to be able to dress their soldiers, do they not? This could be the perfect business opportunity. We would immediately have our scientist Downs begin working on this extensive research, and it actually didn't take but a day or so, and she had it completed for us. With the research completed, all we would really need now is a proper tailoring room, which we swiftly built, and we actually ended up equipping it with 4 separate tailoring benches, making it possible for us to have quite the output of uniforms. The only thing holding us back now is materials. In the meantime, however, we would end up collecting our taxes from all of our settlements in the Outlands, giving us a hefty sum of silver in our treasury. It looks like a lot now, but if we were to have to bribe one of these all-powerful global factions, we could burn through it pretty quickly. Just in case any of you are new here, I should make it clear that this is the second season of this series, but not to worry, if you don't feel like going back and watching the first season, you shouldn't have to, as I feel like I've recapped the main points pretty well already. Basically, we're a global war merchant and the wars are fading away. But I also bring this up because if you're not new here and you did watch season 1, you're probably wondering where is everyone, as our roster of people is a bit lower than usual. Well, it just so happens that at the end of last season, after it was all said and done, I dispersed all of our remaining colonists among our settlements in the Outlands to help reinforce them, but also to increase their production. But many of them, such as Otto, that we were very fond of, have stayed at the Citadel, our stronghold in the Outlands, still serving our great empire ever true. But not only did we leave many of our soldiers in the Outlands, we also basically left all of our vehicles except for our Wiscent Shinichi's Pride that will carry all of our weapons and soldiers that we do have here. Because of this, we decided that we would begin working on some new car parts, that way we could go ahead and start building new vehicles, though this will take a little bit of time, of course. Late into the night though, we received intel that one of our settlements was in danger. It would seem that the Citadel was about to be attacked by the Thromboian Union, a traditional group of highly skilled and very well-equipped tribespeople. The Citadel should be completely fine though, as we have a fine defending force there. It was just a bit strange to see that they were attacking the Citadel head on, and then I realized that we too were being raided. Coming in at the dead of night, a very large group of the Thromboian Union wearing brown and grayish black attire. Quite a bit different than the usual bright colored attire that we see them in. I don't know if this is an attempt at camouflage or if they're really just changing their style. Either way though, this could be a bit of a problem, especially since it would appear that they have their very own makeshift weapons. This is something we've never seen from this tribe before, as they never break out of their traditional weapons and armor. Well, either way, we're not too worried about it. They can't attack us with their new little weapons if there's nothing left of them. that's assuming we can actually hit our target with our mortars, which unfortunately we weren't really able to do. I did however receive notification that these bastards killed our lifter named Heavy Duty. He was in the middle of taking out the trash and they blasted him into scrap metal. We'll make sure they pay for that. After a few hours of planning their attack and killing our lifter, these sons of bitches would start coming right for us. Hiding behind our turrets and embrasures would give us a good edge against our enemies, that and our superior firearm technology of course, but we were still very heavily outnumbered. And even our turrets wouldn't last very long in this firefight. Richard, Scott, Commando and the others would be able to flank the enemy for a hot moment there as they were attempting to attack our turrets, but they quickly realized that they too were going to be overwhelmed by these numbers. In an act of heroism and also desperation, our slave Machu would take Shinichi's pride out and try to attack our enemies with it by running them over, but it stalled out in the sand and was destroyed. Machu himself would also be taken down shortly thereafter. During all of the chaos, it would seem that the tribespeople were very unorganized and were actually beginning to run around carelessly, giving us the opportunity to blast many of them straight into hell. Though it should be noted that some of them were indeed using our defenses against us. Right in the middle of the battle, we received notification that yet another of our settlements in the Outlands was being attacked by the Thromboian Union once more. It would seem that this is a coordinated attack that has been planned out many months in advance. Either way though, we are still in the tail end of this battle, and even if they were to kill us, we will take as many of them to hell with us as we can. Though it seems that that won't be the case today, as they were beginning to retreat, and we too would actually make a strategic retreat into our tunnels here to try and stay away from any stray bullets. This would also give us an ample opportunity to begin trying to tend to our wounded as they were making their way out of our territory, taking down all of our doors and even some of our electronics like our solar panels. And yes, as you can see, it is true they done one hell of a number on our base, but as long as nobody died, I'm not too concerned with it. We can always rebuild, but one thing we cannot do is resurrect. The Thromboian Union might be an enemy to all factions on this planet, including ourselves, but by God do they fight with honor and nobility, and they are extremely fierce, even with such pitiful scrap weapons. I mean, imagine if they had some good guns, like the kind that maybe we could sell to them. An interesting idea. They must be becoming quite desperate if they're trying to make their own weapons out of scrap metal, perhaps running low on their traditional weaponry and supplies. Imagine what kind of damage they could do if they had some of our quality firearms. This could be a good opportunity to stir up some chaos and make some money. Sadly, after the battle was over, I realized that Scott would now be joining Richard in the One Eye Club. Those scrap rifles are pretty dog shit compared to what we have, but they're still pretty darn dangerous. I should be grateful that they didn't have any high quality weapons, otherwise it probably would have went out the back of his head and taken some of his brain with him. Scott's demise not taking place wasn't the only good news. We did also manage to take one of the Thromboian tribespeople as a prisoner. They don't have that great of skills, but they do have a burning passion in construction, which is good for any new hands that we're going to hire, or brainwash into becoming a mercenary. The reason being, of course, is because we have a lot of repairs to do each time we end up getting attacked, and being a global powerhouse, that happens pretty often, unfortunately. We were now in the midst of cleaning up after that major battle, which did include hauling in all of those awful weapons that I've been yapping about for the past 5 or 10 minutes. Who knows, maybe we'll be able to find some unlucky sods who are willing to purchase these pieces of trash off of us. But as we all know, there won't be much trading if we don't have any vehicle to load up our goods into and to, well, take out the trade, so we're going to begin working on a new smuggler airplane. Just as well, while that's in construction, Richard would actually begin working on a brand new bionic eye for Scott. As you can see though, this is unlike any of the bionics that Richard has made prior. This one is special and has been especially made for Scott in particular. A very delicate and time-consuming surgery, but thanks to Richard's very high medical skill, it wasn't an issue and everything went completely fine. And take a gander at that new right eye. Damn, looking very dapper, old man. Muy guapo, papi, muy guapo. By morning, we had also finally finished our new smuggler airplane, which is going to need a fantastic name. If you guys would like to provide some in the comments, and I'll pick and choose. Before we would send Scott out on any diplomatic trade missions in the new plane though, I wanted to keep him here so he could help us with our repairs and construction. I wanted to at least try to get 1 or 2 of our turrets back online before we left, just to ensure that we have appropriate with protection while he's gone. In the meantime though, that night we ended up having a group from the Oak Foundation who came to visit, I suppose? It would appear that they were actually scouting out the base, possibly keeping an eye on our movements. In case you're new here, the Oak Foundation is a separate faction all on its own, but they're kind of like the real-world equivalent of the CIA to the rebel forces. And one thing is for sure, if we're able to see them, it's because they want us to see them. Perhaps they're trying to send a message. Well, either way, it would seem that our defenses are now at least somewhat up to snuff, so I'm going to send Scott out on a trade mission to the Thromboian Union. Now hear me out, because I know what you're thinking. Rat Knight, they're your enemies. They're not going to trade with you, and even if they were willing to trade with you, why would you want to sell guns to your enemies? Well, my friends, not only do we come with guns to trade, but we also come with a peace offering in the form of 10,000 silver. Well, would you look at that? If I would have known giving them a bunch of silver like that would have made them our allies, well, I probably still wouldn't have done it because I like silver. Now that we've offered them our peace offering of all that silver, we can actually do some proper trading with them, and we would end up selling them several of our guns and other types of melee weapons, and we would actually end up purchasing a few of their tribal items just to show good faith. Then it was time for Scott to make the long journey all the way back home. Finally, he would end up arriving, and it was time for us to drop off everything that we had gotten. Now, if you're upset that I gave them all that silver, it may please you to know that we basically got over half of it back when trading, so, you know, I mean, there's that. We are devious indeed. We would focus on building our defenses once more and repairing them as they still weren't finished even up until this point, and I only bring it up because I suppose I've just gotten a bit spoiled with having so many members that this type of thing doesn't take very long at all. I do have a little bit of a solution in mind, but first we're going to be putting our lifter, Heavy Duty, that was killed by the Thromboian tribespeople in a mech gestator to bring him back to life, and then we get on with the solution. I'm going to be gestating a few construction mechs. They don't take near as long compared to trying to recruit pawns, and of course they only require resources, which at the moment we still have plenty of. Speaking of which, we are also going to be expending some of those resources on some proper weapon production so that we may trade them to our new allies once more. Our current production is going to be riot shields that are made out of steel. Pretty self-explanatory, I would think. These are going to help the Thromboians defend themselves while firing at their enemies. The current weapon that we've chosen to produce is BB guns. No, you did not hear me incorrectly, BB guns. Yes, the kind that shoot very small pellets that don't actually do damage. Now, I'm not trying to trick the tribespeople or anything like that by giving them BB guns. No, these are going to actually be practice rifles. Hear me out on this. An adult Thromboian can carry an assault rifle, yes, but a child cannot, and that's where the BB gun comes into play. This will help them train their younger members how to use firearms properly. Yes, I know, I'm a genius, I get it. No, but on a serious note, I do feel that it is a very realistic option for them to practice. Something else we would begin doing is using one of our growing rooms for nothing but cotton. The reason that we're going to do that is so that we can get some cloth and continue our production of uniforms for the factions that are no longer at war. After that, I noticed that our armory was completely overflowing and all the riot shields and BB guns that we had been making couldn't fit, so we began working on plenty of new shelves, weapon lockers, as well as a brand spanking new weapon rack to put them all in. Our two pet iguanas, Blood Diamond and Iguana 1, who needs a name, were sleeping out in our barn for whatever reason. I could have swore we built them beds last season, but apparently not, so we ended up building some in Scott and Richard's room, and it looks like they're all much more comfortable now. The iguanas have a much warmer, safer place to stay at night, and Scott and Richard get those nice, scaly, cuddly cuddles. Very early in the morning, before the sun had even come up, we began loading up the smuggler airplane with many of the weapons we had in storage, as well, of course, as the BB guns and shields that we had made. Commando Jr. would be flying this bad Mama Jamma back over to the Thromboian Union settlements to do a little bit of trading and drop off their weapons, yada yada, you know the drill. He was on his way there, but it's going to take a hot minute. And in the meantime, some other interesting things would happen back at the HQ. Our lifter, Heavy Duty, was back in business and revived, and we had also finished up gestation on a constructoid. He may not look like much, but this little fella, or lass, it's a robot, would be very proficient at repairing our defenses. Finally though, Commando Jr. would begin trading with the Thromboian tribes once more. Shockingly though, they would end up buying our BB guns, but had no interest in the riot shield. shields. Truthfully, we could have contacted them ahead of time to see if they would be willing to buy these, but we didn't, and now we need to find somebody else to purchase them. Speak of the devil, it would appear that we have a combat supplier coming in from the Outlands, although I've never heard of this faction before. Known as the Forgotten. Now, factions do pop up in the Outlands very frequently, and most of the time they're just simply scavengers or some other type of criminal organization. But this group in particular was made up of deserters and veterans from both the United Rebel Forces and the RimWorld Marshal Service. Very unique indeed. But either way, to simplify things, they came here looking to purchase some guns, and by God, we're going to sell them some guns, as well as some melee weapons, even clubs. They were extremely under-equipped. And because of that, they were willing to buy just about any of the shitty weapons that we had. Desperation is our specialty. I wish them luck in whoever they plan on attacking or encountering with those weapons. By God, with those scrap rifles, they're gonna need all the luck they can get. Though I do wonder if supplying a militia group that is made up from deserters from both large factions on the planet will piss them off. It'll probably be fine. A little bit of time later, and Commando Jr. had finally made it back home with some resources that we got from the tribespeople, as well as all the riot shields they wouldn't purchase. I did check, and even the Forgotten didn't want them, unfortunately, so I guess they're ours. But on to something a little bit more interesting, we ended up purchasing something called Metal Blood Serum from the tribespeople. No doubt some type of hippy-dippy concoction, but supposedly they said it'll help us be more impervious to damage during battle, so we'll give it a shot. Speaking of shots as well, Scott here would be taking a few pot shots at some nearby gazelle. It's actually quite rare that we get packs of animals in the desert, and it is a nice little occasion because we get to supplement a lot of the plant matter that we make our food out of for some nice meaty protein. But not only that, a pack of gazelle would also give us plenty of plain leather, which we can use for our uniform production. And when we got a bit low on all of our leathers, we could stitch them together into a patch leather, which would allow us to make more naturally. And we had some humble beginnings to our little stockpile of uniforms. Now those damn bastards are going to have to dye them themselves. We don't have that kind of time. Now something tells me though, with this peace treaty going on, the Forgotten and the Thromboyan Union will be our biggest customers, or at least that's how it seems. So maybe, just maybe, if we can get the rebels and marshals dependent on us for uniforms, maybe some other items, they won't get pissed off and attack us for supplying their enemies. Now while still loosely on the topic of the uniforms, we would actually end up harvesting our cotton plants finally a few days later, and we would use that cloth to begin making more and more of said uniforms. Now by this point we felt like we had enough to make a pretty penny, so we would actually begin stocking the plane with them so that we could fly them out and begin selling them, to which of course we would do. Now I do know that there's the peace treaty and whatnot, but I'm sure there's still a little bit of animosity between the two factions, so I didn't want to show favoritism towards one side or the other, so I would end up trying to sell about half of the uniforms to the marshals and half to the rebels, so that way it's even. However, on our way back home, we would end up picking up a rebel distress signal near the Outlands, just on the outskirts of the Union's territory. Faction bombardment. We would end up sending Scott down there just in case after the battle to maybe try and scavenge some of the weapons. Because remember my friends, a used gun is brand spanking new to a new client. Ain't no shame in my game, baby. Upon our arrival, even from the sky as we flew over before landing, we could see that this Thromboyan village was in complete and utter chaos. A hellish, gruesome battle in every sense of the word. It would appear that rebel forces were attempting to take the village for whatever reason, but were completely caught off guard by the Thromboyans' new technology. Who could have sold them that? It wouldn't take very long at all for the rebels to have their asses completely handed to them. I think the problem here for them was they were relying a little bit too much on their hunter mechanoids to help them out. They did, however, have one brave soul in the form of Orion, who wasn't giving up that easy. The lone protagonist taking on an army of enemy soldiers behind enemy lines. Or at least I'm sure that's how he saw himself. To these poor tribespeople, he was an invasive species. A foreigner from another planet here to take everything they had, and they would not give up their home easily. Oh well, maybe they'll build a statue or some monuments to him or something. But as for this battle, it would appear appear that the rebels are all dead, and as are their mechanoids, sure to be smashed up and turned into some type of something for the tribespeople, I'm sure. And we officially declare ourselves the victor, as we are going to be swooping in with our plane to collect a few guns, as well as knives and anything else that they've dropped that we can take. And boy howdy, let me tell you, did they drop them. We got shotguns, we got shivs, we got grenades, swords, rifles, and everything in between. Now comes the hard part, which is loading all of it into the looks like we're already back home, and we're going to be unloading it. Now we have all of our helpers here, our soldiers, to load it back into our armory so that we can sell it. Perhaps a group like the Forgotten will come from the Outlands and wish to buy things from us once more. I highly doubt that they would mind any second-hand weapons. In the meantime, however, we are going to be working on some new research. I've decided that we would begin on some advanced solar power generators. And yes, we do already have advanced geothermal powered generators unlocked, but we only have so many steam geysers on the map, and the sun is almost always present during the day. We are in the desert after all. We would have Downs go ahead and begin working on said research, though that will take quite a bit of time as it's a hefty project. In the meantime, as we're researching that, to kind of go with our expanding base and expanding power grid, I thought it might be best for us to build some large advanced batteries as well as a small one, but we ran out of advanced components, so we just built more large batteries. Eventually, once we have the resources, I'd like to make this room much larger with more of the advanced batteries, as they are, of course, much more efficient. Later on into the night, we were working around the clock on building some new forms of lighting around the base. That way we can ensure efficient visibility throughout all of the darkness. We don't want any uninvited guests sneaking in now, do we? Ugh, speaking of which, it would appear that we have an entire pack of man-hunting cougars that have been affected by scaria coming down from the desert mountains to, well, try to eat us alive, it would seem. We in the professional business call this a little bit of, oh shit, that's not good, kind of situation. Well, nevertheless, these rotten kitty cats were coming right for us. Now, luckily, our flame turrets and bear traps were doing quite a number on them, as were our rifles. But that being said, there were a lot of these no-good putty cats, so the cleanup effort here is going to take a few hours, no doubt. The battlefield was full of blood, sweat, and even a little bit of tears and some bullet casings, as the night was filled with the hefty groans of many a cougar. Make with that information what you will. Either way, it would appear that we've won. Sorry, kitty. Now it's time for the cleanup, though. We're going to have to haul all these rotten corpses away and all the non-rotten ones in so that we could chop them up and eat them, as well as put out fires and rearm our traps. After that, I decided it might be a good idea for us to go ahead and begin expanding our treasury, as we have some big plans in store in terms of our silver. As it stands right now, we do get a lot of money from the taxes of our settlements in the Outlands who have been selling guns on our behalf, and of course we plan on making more and more money by doing that ourselves here as well. So as one might imagine, all this extra room here, we've essentially doubled our storage capacity in the treasury, is going to be very much needed. We have big plans, big plans. As for our weapon production, I've decided to begin working on some flame-based weapons, as they do fetch a pretty penny. And the best thing about the incendiary launchers is they don't actually require kin fuel to be created. Meaning, of course, we spend the same amount of time, but less resources for the same type of weapon, which is nice. We would once again have the Forgotten coming to visit us from the Outlands, and this time around they looked a little different. It seems that they've recently been in some sort of combat. It seems the majority of them have suffered several injuries. Well, I hope they're not coming here for refunds on their last purchase, because one, we don't do refunds, and two, we'll completely destroy them. Upon conversing with them further, it would seem that they came to buy more weapons of even higher quality. That way they don't lose just like they did in their last battle, or so we're assuming. Funny enough though, they actually had some items of interest that we wanted, some components and a chainsaw. And of course we also made just over 1,000 silver off of them. But now this chainsaw was of particular interest, unlike any that we had ever seen before. It was apparently made from a material called, let me check my notes, bioferrite. Never heard of her, but this bad son of a bitch was extremely durable. As you can see, we actually decided to test it out against the side of this this mountain, and it done quite a number on it without any number being done on the chainsaw itself. Now by this point we had finished up our extensive research into advanced solar panels, and we were now going to begin researching autocannon turrets, which I can't believe we haven't done already. But either way, once we finally complete this research, which shouldn't take very long, we'll unlock 4 different types of autocannon turrets, 2 of which are actually handheld, and we'll be able to sell them after mass producing them some time later. And I also noticed that the relations between the Marshall settlements and the United Rebel Forces with us were beginning to decline, even though they had a tendency to go towards goodwill. Perhaps a bad omen or foreshadowing for what is to come in our relationships with them. After that, one of our settlements in the Outlands was under attack by the Confederacy of Banya. Just in case we do have some newbies among us today, or in case you need a little bit of a refresher, the Confederacy of Banya is actually another of the more dominant tribal factions. We have the Thromboian Union and then them. Not that it was actually all that pressing of an issue, of course, as we did have quite a large defending force that we would assign to the settlement, and everything should be hunky-dory. With that over with, it was time for us to begin working on our very first advanced solar panel, which we only could build one of, unfortunately, because we didn't have enough advanced components, but, you know, we'll get around to building more. Even though we do have a bit of a lack of resources at the moment, we weren't lacking in a few car parts, and I decided to make a few extra. That way we could go ahead and finish off a Traveler for Scott, which is his and the Empire's very first muscle car. Now, I know what you're thinking. I probably should have expended those resources to try and rebuild a Wissant like our Shinichi's Pride that we previously had, but I was afraid we wouldn't have enough, and I don't know, I really like the muscle car, to be honest. Besides, this unnamed hot rod can be used in combat. I mean, just look at that grill. Diabolical. But that's enough about cars. This isn't the car empire, it's the gun empire, and we're going to be working on plenty of more guns. Well, actually, we're going to be working on the things that go in guns, i.e. ammo. We are going to make absolutely sure that our new tribal allies, as well as any other faction that has the silver, has enough ammo to do whatever they wish. A bit of time later, though, we had finally recruited the one Thromboian that we took prisoner earlier in the episode, known as Gak Rigik, I believe, although I'm just going to call him Gak for now, for short. We would quickly send our new compadre here into the armory to equip himself to defend his new home if he were to need to do so. We gave him a shield, a pistol, a rifle, and even a traditional Thromboian hammer. No doubt he'll need to take some time to get used to such high-quality firearms, but something tells me he's already quite skilled with that melee weapon. I also remembered that we had a Toxalope that I had promptly named Mistake in the last season, who was currently starving to death because, well, I had forgot about him, as I had mentioned there. But yeah, luckily I remembered to feed him before he ended up dying. There's always next time. But now it's time for us to really begin buckling down and just kind of locking in on producing ammo and weapons. We would continue stockpiling the same industrial ammo that we have been making, as it is quite cheap. We would also begin producing some auto pistols as well as a few steel axes as well. Not exactly what I would call big ticket items that are going to fetch us pounds and pounds of silver, but they are what people need, I suppose. Especially for smaller and maybe less fortunate factions, we'll say. This may be all that they could really afford from us. But I mean, what else is there really for us to do? This peace treaty has really limited our clientele as well as our production of weapons, or at least the quality of the weapons that we can produce and the different types. Gang members and freedom fighters don't exactly go around buying Apache helicopters or anything of that sort, unfortunately. I will also say that I really hope the weapons that we have been selling and the people that we've been selling them to don't get too chaotic because, well, we're not exactly the most diplomatically charismatic types. I'm sure they won't cause too much trouble though, right? Right?